everybody, welcome back for another magical movie review. My name is Magic Molly and I am here to bring you all of my thoughts about all of our favorite movies that we watched growing up. Right now we're tying up the end of our Disney Princess series. Today's review is going to be Frozen from 2013. If you haven't joined for a magical movie review before, we like to do things in kind of segments. So we'll do a magical recap for those of you who haven't seen the movie in a while or have never seen the movie, so you can kind of get an idea of what the movie is about. Then we'll do magical moments, things that I like about the movie, things that were really special. Then we'll go on to enchanting efforts, which are things that I thought left big question marks over my head or things that I thought could have been done better. Then we'll talk about our very magical person, or VMP, so the character that kind of sticks out to me as being important to the story and or provides the most entertainment. And then we'll go over my movie rankings of the Disney Princess films so far. And then for those of you who are nerdy like me, you can stick around after that for us to dive into the Nerd Alert, which is where I dive into the origin story or where we came to be, kind of the history of Disney's Frozen. Now I'm very excited about this particular movie review because I've been wanting to wear this shirt so bad, and I have been counting down the Sundays in which I do. It's my Love is an Open Door shirt from Once Upon a T-shirt. I'll link their Etsy shop down below. I've spent so much money in their shop. They have the cutest stuff. They're super creative, and they've got doodles and just really clever mashup shirts, so definitely check them out. I also have my, if it'll zoom in, I've got a little bit of frost for you. Very iridescent. I'll do the wave with my face, so you're welcome. Alright, so let's jump in and get started with a magical recap. Now, I did write this down. No, I didn't really practice because the last few have been working out, so we'll see how it goes. Two sisters play, but the oldest, Elsa, has snow and ice powers, but she accidentally shoots her sister Anna in the head, forcing them to decide to let Anna forget all about Elsa's powers. Anna wants to build snowmen after that, but Elsa kind of becomes a hermit. Like 6 years later, their parents go on a trip and their boat sinks, so they die. About 4 years after that, Elsa takes the throne. Anna meets a handsome man at the coronation, and they decide to get married, and Elsa's like, WTF. The sisters start fighting, and then Elsa shoots ice out of her fingers. Everybody goes crazy. She runs away to the North Mountain. Anna goes after her with the help of a mountain man named Kristoff. Elsa shoots her in the heart by accident, and only an act of true love will save her. Kristoff takes her back to Hans, the handsome man, but it turns out Hans was playing her like a fool. Hans tries to kill Elsa, but Anna ends up saving her, hence acting in true love. Lifting the curse, then Elsa brings back summer, happy ever after. That one was kind of hard to write without it being like too terribly long. I thought it ended up being okay. So with that being said, I have many magical moments that stuck out to me watching this movie. This movie came out when I was in college, the summer before my senior year, and the soundtrack was released during the summer, that is, and then the film came out in November of 2013. And I was working at a summer camp at the time, and all of the counselors, all of the kids were going crazy over Let It Go. So that brings me to magical moment number one. The soundtrack is absolutely incredible. This was one of the only movies where I actually impulsively was singing the song, every single song, all the way through. And there's Aladdin and Beauty and the Beast, which are some of my favorite soundtracks, and I did sing along, and I think maybe because I sing those all the time that they didn't really I didn't really sing them while watching the movie. But Frozen, I feel like it's a sing-along for everybody every time you watch it. I also liked that Let It Go was kind of the main female lead song, and it was about just accepting who you are as a person, which was fantastic. That's just kind of a good message for young women anyway. And then just the Love is an Open Door with Hans and Anna was just a really fun duet, professing love true love that we thought of at the beginning, but in a really silly way, not in like a taking yourself too seriously kind of way. So I really liked that. Speaking of Anna, I swear she is my spirit animal. Like, she is the quirkiest princess, like maybe next to Rapunzel from Tangled. Rapunzel's kind of silly and like doesn't take herself too seriously, but Anna is super awkward. Like the whole boat scene when she first meets Hans and like accidentally calls him gorgeous, and she goes, wait, what? Like, I feel like I've said that so many times like on my own that I felt like it was me in the movie and made it super relatable. I also really loved the sidekick characters, like the secondary characters of Olaf and Sven. Sven doesn't say a single word technically, like Kristoff kind of speaks for him, but even just like his facial expressions and like how he acts in scenes makes him feel like a real person with lines and everything when he's kind of doing those facial expressions. Like, for example, after Kristoff and Sven leave Arendelle and like Kristoff is sad, there's a whole scene with Sven where like he's telling Kristoff to go back and doesn't say a single word, and like you can feel the love and feel like the mutual respect between the two of them, which I think is just good animation and creativity from the Imagineers. But just the characters, and Jonathan Groff, who plays Kristoff, which I just realized, Jonathan Groff, Kristoff, that's clever. Like, his ability to voice act like two different characters. I've got something in my eyelash. Like, play two characters that are talking to each other in the same scene. Like, I think that was just really, really good. Also, Josh Gad as Olaf. I have never laughed out loud so much at one character out of all of the Disney movies that I can think of. Like, he and his one-liners are absolutely amazing, and that's one, delivery on his part, but also just really good writing. And I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if Josh Gad like threw in a couple of like improv lines there. He's just, Olaf as a character is adorable. He is kind of he's the voice of the audience in some ways. Like, as we've been watching these Disney movies over the years, like all of the silly things that we think of, or kind of like the honesty is like coming out in this character. Like when Anna is like freezing to death basically, and Olaf is saving her life and talking about true love, like he's the one that makes her realize that Kristoff is in love with her and she loves him, and like he's willing to take you back to someone else. Like, that in itself is an act of true love. And he's worth melting for Anna, which I think is sweet. And then of course when they realize Kristoff comes back, he's like, oh, I guess he doesn't love you, which is hysterical on its own. One of my favorite lines though that like really cracked me up was when they are coming back, or like they're going up or down the mountain, I can't remember which, but Olaf is like listening in on the conversation. They talk about Kristoff's skull, and Olaf just goes, I don't have a skull or bones. Like, I lost my mind. Like, that is just incredibly real and honest. Like, it's literally just complete honesty. He's just stating fact, and yet it's the most hysterical line out of the entire movie. I also didn't realize this either, but as they start running from the ice castle, I started thinking about the giant snow monster, Marshmallow. And I've always known that his name is Marshmallow, but I couldn't remember, like, I was like, how did we get that name? Because, you know, there's some characters that Disney names, but like it's not actually named in the movie, but like the writers kind of have always had a name for a character. Like, I thought it was that kind of situation, but it was actually Olaf that named Marshmallow. He goes, we had just escaped old Marshmallow back there, And I was like, oh, finally, now I realize who actually named this monster. Then it just kind of sticks and they have like their own little spin-off, and like I think that that's great that he named the big old monster that's kind of him, you know what I mean? Like Olaf is the fun, youthful version of Elsa's powers, and then Marshmallow is like the steroid version with like her anger and fear mixed in. You can kind of see how her powers have evolved from when she's smaller to when she's an adult, and how her emotions are coming out in her powers, in her creations. So I thought that that in itself was a magical moment when we're seeing that scene of her creations kind of battling each other there for a minute. I also thought that the whole Hans romance plot twist was actually like truly a plot twist. It had been a while since I'd actually watched Frozen, and I was trying to think of it from like when I first watched it, when we watched it this weekend. There's no clues in the beginning that Hans is just playing her like a fiddle. Like there's nothing to give us any kind of warning or red flags that I can see. Like even when after they meet in the boat and he's like watching her leave, he looks like romanticized by her. When he's holding down the fort, when Anna's like chasing after Elsa, he's saying that like they're in charge, he's just kind of making the decisions, but in no way is he like, this place is gonna be mine. Like he doesn't say that until the moment when he's supposed to kiss Anna. Then it all comes out, like what his plan was all along. So it's refreshing to see, one, that there's like a plot twist in who the villain is, because we don't actually have a villain for like 85% of the movie. So we don't have a villain until the very end. You could kind of argue that fear, like the emotion of fear, is the villain in the movie, which I think is valid, but there's not like a physical representation of a villain until the end of the movie. So I thought that was interesting, that we've been so completely entranced by these characters and the antagonist is more of an emotion until we get to Hans's like big reveal. And the fact that it was like an actual plot twist, that's very rare for me in a movie. Most movies are predictable in like what's gonna happen. Sometimes how we get there is a surprise to me, but like this one, I remember when I first watched it was like a complete surprise. Like I didn't see that coming. And it was honestly refreshing to see finally the prince and the princess meet and fall in love on the first night is not reality. Like this is exactly, one, Elsa called it in the beginning, like you can't marry someone you just met. But then like the fact that that's true and they don't end up together because they fell in love on the first night, like it's giving young children a more realistic view of like what love is supposed to be. So that was nice. And that kind of goes into the whole next magical moment of like the act of true love. Of course, all of the characters automatically, see what I did there, went to true love's kiss, because that's how it's always been. It's always been true love's kiss is the act of true love that's gonna get you out of this predicament or break the curse. Granted, there was no kiss, nobody even tried, or Anna tried, but Hans didn't kiss her. I'm almost kind of wondering, like, if he did, would it have made a difference? Like, because he didn't love her, actually, would the kiss have been broken? Or would there have been any kind of change if he had at least tried? But good for him for not taking advantage of the moment just for a kiss, even though he knew that he didn't love her. But it's so crazy that like everybody, even like me watching the movie for the first time, I'm like, oh, okay, they're gonna get Hans to kiss her and like the spell will be broken, to a Anna realizes that she loves Kristoff and goes out to find him. Like, she's still actively pursuing the act of true love has to be romantic up until the moment, the split-second decision to save her sister versus kissing Kristoff, like literally say equal distance away from both opportunities, and she chooses her sister over true love, when in fact that's the true love act that saves them all anyway. So I just thought, one, it was a refreshing change to see like the act of true love be like familial love, but also to see literally the decision, the gears turning, and her looking back and forth and choosing her family over romance. So that was, I could nitpick it just like I could for every other movie and find every single line, every single scene that I laughed at or that made me smile, but those are the big things that stood out as magical moments to me. Talking about the true love, the act of true love thing, this is a good segue into my enchanting efforts. The first enchanting effort, when I was thinking about, like when I was writing my notes for the magical moments, I had a second thought about the whole like act of true love from Kristoff. If he truly loves Anna, and vice versa, in a romantic way, wouldn't putting her needs first by delivering her to Hans, even though like he loves her and probably could have kissed her, to try to save her, like isn't that an act of true love? So wouldn't that have broken the curse as well? Or is it because their relationship was so new and they hadn't like admitted that to each other yet? Like maybe that's not an option. I don't know. That was just one thing that kind of left a big question mark above my head. I also had a couple of other random thoughts throughout the movie. Either don't make sense to me or I was like, that was stupid. The first big one was at the very beginning when Elsa accidentally shoots Anna with her ice powers on the head and they take her to see the trolls. Grandpappy is like analyzing the situation and he realizes that Elsa is the one that was born with the power, and he's basically telling her like fear is the enemy of your powers. And what does this asshole do? He scares her. If he had just talked to her like a normal person, then we probably would have avoided half of this trouble in the first place. Like, Elsa wouldn't have been so scared of her powers, and they wouldn't have had to hide it from Anna. Her parents being afraid made Elsa afraid, and also he scared the bejesus out of Elsa in the beginning. So like, if they had approached the situation as a learning opportunity to say, hey, let's start having like snow lessons or magic power lessons to learn how to control it, to make you use it in a smart way, then maybe fear could be like lesson number 6. Maybe if she had a better baseline of like, this is how I can use my power, then you learn like what the enemy is, then I think it would have turned out a little bit better. That's just me. That's me overthinking it. Of course, that takes away like the whole premise of the movie. That was the first thing out of my mouth. I'm like, well, you just said fear was the enemy and you're scaring the shit out of this little girl. So of course, like, things are gonna go bad. Like, why wouldn't they? I was a little annoyed with Grandpappy, to be honest. Then I thought things were going pretty well. There was a couple other things that I would like giggle at. And then we get to Eternal Winter. Anna's going after Elsa, gets thrown off the horse, starts freezing to death. So she goes to Oaken's supply house in Sana. I'm very confused by this situation because like she's already like halfway up the mountain. So I can only imagine that they probably get a lot of snow anyway. So why is the winter supply so low? And of course, of the 5 things that are laying there in the winter clearance section, half of it are clothes that perfectly fit her. If your supply was that low, the reality is that you probably don't have what I need to survive this winter. I'm just incredibly confused by that part. And then the only other big thing that I think about every time in every scene that involves the castle, the ice castle that Elsa makes, is where does she sleep? Obviously she made herself a room to rest, right? Or if she just like constantly awake. And if she does sleep, is she sleeping on a bed made of ice? That can't be comfortable. Like I don't really get that. Apart from like her ice dress, I'm like, your nipples probably could cut through glass right now wearing an ice dress. But I know that the cold doesn't bother her anyway, whatever, like she's probably fine. Cold bothering you regardless, sleeping on a rock hard ice bed is probably gonna make anybody pissed off or cranky or not be able to work through their emotions. I wanna know, like, is it mostly like powder? Is it a water bed? Does she have like water powers too at this point? Like, I don't know. That's one of the big questions that I had. Ice bed? No ice bed? Comfort? I don't know. So that brings us to the end of our enchanting efforts. I honestly had a hard time picking who my VMP would be. And I'll tell you that I went back and forth between Anna and Sven. And the reason why I kept going back and forth between the two of them is because I liked them for the same reasons. They were funny, they provided a lot of entertainment. Olaf did too, but like for different reasons. And they also both provided a lot to the important moments in the story. Like Sven, for example, Sven gets them back to Arendelle, like lightning fast, to try to save Anna. Also, he convinces Kristoff to go back and helps him realize that they love each other. And he's just incredibly adorable. I ultimately went with Anna because she is the one that really brings everything to a head. In the beginning, she's the one that wants to play and accepts Elsa for who she is with her powers. Granted, she isn't the reason why, like, she doesn't know that later on, and she wants Elsa to talk about her feelings, which ultimately brings us to the point where Elsa, like, loses control and has the ice barricade between them. Even with that, when Anna relearns everything about Elsa's powers, she doesn't even hesitate to go after her or defend her sister. Like, that's just who she is. Like, and she's totally accepting of her. And like, from the beginning, there's an immense amount of love there, like familial sister love. They hardly even know each other. So I think that shows a lot of dedication and a lot of loyalty, which is another just characteristic that I value in my VMPs. And then, of course, like, she goes after her. She just tells her, like, I'll always be there for you. And, of course, like, she literally is willing to sacrifice herself to save Elsa, and ultimately is the one that discovers, like, true love. An act of true love doesn't have to be between, like, a romance couple. So, I went with Anna. Stand by it. I also liked that she was a princess in a double princess movie. Like, there's two princesses in the movie, and one does not outshine the other. They have completely different personalities. They have completely different character evolutions throughout the story, and yet are so closely tied together because of that familial love. And kind of like the opposites attract kind of thing with sisters, which I think is great. So this brings us to our movie rankings, and surprisingly, and not so surprisingly, I put this one in this order. Starting with Beauty and the Beast will always be number 1, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Frozen, The Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Mulan, Cinderella, Pocahontas, Brave, Snow White, and Sleeping Beauty. So I put this one forth. You guys know that the deciding factor is typically the soundtrack for me, but also another reason why I put this one, I actually kind of tangoed with Frozen, Princess and the Frog, and Tangled. I knew it was going to be in that range because of the plot of the movie. I found it really enjoyable. I'm super into the whole like Nordic theme. I knew that I was going to put it above Tangled kind of after going through the plot. The soundtrack is what put it above The Princess and the Frog, but it was hard because I really do love the Princess and the Frog soundtrack. This one was really difficult to place. Not the range, I knew that it was going to be kind of in the top half of my Disney list, but I really, really love Frozen. I think a lot of people did too. I think it was just a nice change of pace. There was just so many new things that Disney was trying with this film, with both the animation, the storyline, the characters. I just really loved this movie. So that brings us to the end of the actual movie review itself. For those of you who are ready to stick around for the nerd alert, this one is actually going to be pretty short because I tried to sit down and read like the entire thing, but I ended up really like skimming the story and also finding a summary of the original The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen, which was released in the late 19th century. It's an interesting read. I liked it. It all started coming back to me because my grandfather, so my dad's dad, he actually bought me the Hans Christian Andersen cartoons. So they actually made the Snow Queen into like a mini movie before, an animated movie. And as I was reading the story, I remembered watching that little film. So things started to kind of like piece together. But it was really interesting the way that they actually wrote the story. It's in 7 like short story parts. And you can kind of think of it like at the beginning of a movie that might have several subplots. They all end up coming together towards like around story 4 or 5. And then at the end, you've got like the happily ever after from everybody. It's going to be short because other than like the Snow Queen character and maybe a few things about like there's a mirror that gets shattered and like hits people in the heart and turns their heart to ice, or gets in their eye and it makes them see the world as like ugly or negative. Like there's some theming there. The plots are so totally different. I think it was the story that started it all, but ultimately I think Frozen is a vastly original story, which is unique from most of these films, these Disney princess films. While like Rapunzel, like of course that story is based in some of the original story. They do a lot of their own like creative original story work too, but this is almost like completely separate from the original The Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen. I'm almost wondering too if they pay homage by naming the prince or ultimately the bad guy Hans. Like I wonder if there's a connection there so that they can have some tie-in with the story. But yeah, I don't think there's really that much to the origin story. It was interesting to find like that is kind of the central point of like this is where it all started. The director of Frozen, Mike Giaimo, I think that's how you say his name, that is like where he started, but then like the rest of the story is just really inspired by the locations, the local culture from Norway. The Sami people of Norway have heavy influence in the first Frozen with like Kristoff's outfit, for example, and just kind of the the general mythology, the storytelling of Norway and like the original culture. Like they're very much related to the same story of like Native Americans and being colonized. Like it was very interesting to learn a little bit about that. I want to dive into it a little bit more just because I'm curious, but it doesn't really relate to the Frozen story itself. But I will link a couple of the resources that I found, so if anybody wants to do some digging on their own, you're absolutely more than welcome to. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know that the nerd alert was pretty short this time around. Definitely will post everything down below with all the links that I found and resources that I have, so click into those. If there's anything that I missed or any thoughts that you have about Disney's Frozen, absolutely put your thoughts in the comments and let me know kind of if you have been keeping up with your rankings. I'd love to hear what you guys think of these as well. So we only have one more Disney princess film for the original set. We've got Moana coming up next week. Definitely go back and watch more of the magical movie reviews so that you can kind of see where we are. I've really enjoyed doing these. Thank you guys so much for those of you who've been watching these week to week. I sincerely appreciate your support and all the conversations that have come out of this, and meeting new people and getting new perspectives on these movies has been really wonderful for me. Don't forget to subscribe, like this video if you want to keep these going. I'd really love to do more of these for new series, and I'll see you guys next week.